here to the table tonight. And just so you know, we'll be doing a hybrid type meetings, and that it has been written. Could you tell them a little bit about the hybrid format?
Are you speaking to me?
Holly, yes.
Yes. Okay. So state law passed a new law stating that for boards and commissions, city municipalities and governments must offer a virtual or telephone or some type of audio option for community members and members of the board or commission to join that way. So moving forward, we will always have this option available to you and to the community.
Okay. So this time I want everybody to review the agenda, and in doing so, do we have any members from the public that have joined that would like to speak?
It does not look like it.
You don't have any hands up? Okay. At our previous meeting, just to kind of recap, we went over the policy for de-escalation, and we also went over the policy for vehicle pursuit. And later on in this meeting, it was determined that there were some changes or some more things that we need to address with the de-escalation policy, and we'll be going over that later on in the meeting. But before we do anything else, we have a special presentation that we have, and I'd like to read the presentation that was presented to me, and I want to read this. And this is from the Eugene Police Department. This is a certificate of appreciation presented to Police Commissioner Dr. Michael Haynes Garcia, June 9, 2022. Dr. Haynes Garcia, your work through the Eugene Police Commission has served the community honorably since February 22nd, 2021. You provided valuable insight on countless policy reviews and subject matters, including officer safety and wellness, downtown safety, use of lethal force for crowd control, diversity, equity, and inclusion, along with a myriad of other significant topics. Your additional efforts as liaison provided the commission with valuable insight into the efforts of the Civilian Review Board. Your leadership, perspective, and participation has been a great asset and will be missed. Because of the great work you have accomplished through the Police Commission and for the Eugene Police Department, you are hereby awarded with the Eugene Police Department Certificate of Appreciation. Thank you, Chris Skinner, Police Chief, Lucy Venice, Mayor. So thank you, and we'll make sure you get this. And along with that, you've been given a challenge coin from, and it says, serving with honor since 18, it says City of Eugene Police, and it says City of Eugene Police Department, and it's one of these coins. So thank you very much. We all enjoyed working with you, and I don't know who your replacement will be, but we really enjoy working with you. Thank you. So next is we will be dealing with officer elections. On June 30th, 2022, Commissioners Dallas Boggs and Severio Mogart will end their terms as chair and vice chair. The bylaws specify that the chair and vice chair shall serve for 1 year. A commissioner may not be elected as chair for more than 3 consecutive terms, and the election will be held no later than the commission's regular meeting in June. This action item for the police commission is to elect both the police commission chair and vice chair. The bylaw provides general election proceedings as follows. Any member may nominate a candidate from the membership for the position of chair and vice chair. Nominations needed to be seconded. a member may, if a person nominates you, you want to withdraw it, you can. You can be placed on nomination announcing that, let's see here. Any member may move to close the nominations, and then a second is required. So I can tell you right off the bat that if someone nominates me, I'm very interested in continuing as the chair of this commission. And we're now, we have a hand, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with the chair. And then if anyone wants to nominate for the position of president, so we can start off with Commissioner Wynn. You have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to nominate you, Mr. Chairman, to re-chair this board.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any more hands up for the position of president?
There was my hand up, but I was going to nominate you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other hands up for the position of president? So it looks
Move
to me,
to elect by acclamation. That we all just have to agree. We
okay,
don't have to do the full voting process.
yeah, and we sure don't. So we like to move that it looks like unchallenged for the position of president, and I humbly accept the position of president. Thank you very much.
There.
And I was going to open this as a time, and I want, because I take this very
Yeah,
seriously.
yeah. Technically, you still need to move on the motion. So all those in favor, all those opposed, but you can.
I'd like to move on the motion. All those in favor of me being president, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very much. One of the things that I just jotted down some notes, and then we'll go right into the vice president election, is that when I look back through all this stuff that we've gone through and working with you that I feel so good about, I felt that I provided in some way, some form of leadership to the commission. I like to stay on point when we're dealing with reviews to policies and so forth. I believe that I provide an inclusive atmosphere. And I like everyone to know that I try to keep and try to make sure that we keep EPD accountable, but we're also working together with them for goals. So we all stay, so we're basically all on the same page. And I also, some of my favorite things that we did was bringing in my sister when we were dealing with the policy with domestic violence, bringing in Dr. Lake, and also making sure that we utilize the experts that EPD already has right in front of us when we're going over things. So when people are speaking about things, we have someone at the table who knows exactly what they're talking about. And then what we're doing is just adding, listening to the expert, and then if there's areas that we need to improve, there's area things that need to be changed, then we're changing it, but we're changing it when we have the information in front of us. And that's kind of how I want to continue next year. So we will continue doing the things that we've been doing. And thank you very much for electing me. So now we have the position of vice chair. Is anyone here have their hands up that want to nominate a person for vice chair?
I do want to continue in the position.
Yes. Okay, starting off. Commissioner Mogart does want to continue in a position. So I will start off because he's the current person who is the vice chair. I nominate Vice Chair Mogart for him to continue with me on the commission.
Second.
I see Commissioner B. Your hand is up.
There was a second.
Was there a second? Yeah.
Councilman.
Yes, and it was so.
Did you call on me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Well, I think with great honor, I would like to nominate Commissioner Bonnie Dominguez for the position of vice chair. And I do this because Bonnie, I know you would be a great vice chair, and I hope that you would accept my nomination. You've demonstrated your, leadership ability through many attributes, including your willingness to take on the task of learning about policing by attending the Citizens Academy, amongst other attributes. Your attendance has been impeccable. Your curiosity about, policies, about policing is also, admirable. This is not to say that, my perception of Vice Chair Mogart is of any, negative consequences or anything like that. But I think, we have not had a female leader as chair or vice chair since the time I've been a part of this commission. And this goes back to even before my time here, and I've been here for 3 years. I've seen mostly just guys up there. And aside from that, I think, you're qualified. And I hope that you will get this opportunity.
Do we have a
Second.
second? Yes, we do have a second. So we have 2 names. Do we have any more nominations for the position of vice chair?
So I accept the nomination.
And Bonnie, do you accept the
I
nomination?
accept the nomination too. Thank you for thinking of me.
All right, thank you. Is there any more hands up there? So, and you were saying, Councilor Zelinka, I need to close this out for vice chair?
Well, now you need to do the vote
Okay,
between the 2 candidates. If you close, you ask
So
for final nominations and then close the nominations and then do a vote,
all right.
one and then the other.
Okay, so Holly has sent everyone something by way of email, and me and Commissioner Winbrock have state-of-the-art ballots in our hands. This was provided from the Eugene Police Department, and I helped construct them. And she'll grab our votes, and we'll do elections. All those in favor that we do elections, say aye.
Do we have any other people that are coming on in this evening?
I see no more hands.
They're not here.
I need to, yeah, that's the importance of punctuality and so forth that we have to have at these meetings. So there's no one else that I see this here. Do we have everything?
Can I give a speech from the floor?
Yes, 100%. No. Why don't we start with Commissioner Mogart with to tell us why you want to continue as vice chair.
Thank you, Chair Boggs. So I have the pleasure once a month to meet with Chair Boggs and with the internal side of this commission, and we've had a lot of work that we've gotten done, a lot of different aspects of this work that we've kind of worked, we've presented to this body. And I think it's really important that those things be seen and done and continue to be done. And it feels as though we've just started this work. We haven't really gotten a foothold in what we have going on yet. And I, really look forward to being able to continue sort of setting the track of where we saw this particular makeup, me and Chair Boggs, going for a few years at least. I have no intentions of running for chair at any point, just time-wise, I don't have that ability. But I do want to continue to sit in this position because I think that there's a path that we see going, and I would like to see that path finished and that track done. And that is not to say anything about Bonnie. I think Bonnie's great. I've worked with Bonnie in the past. We've done things in the past, and I think she's going to be a great leader on this body. I just want to see the kind of final fruition of the work that me and Chair Boggs has been doing. And the year has really just come and gone in no time, and we haven't really got been able to to see any of the fruits of the labor that we've put into it.
Thank you. Commissioner Dominguez? Would you like to share with us?
Oh, yeah, sure.
the-
Well, just to speak for myself, it's basically, you know, I went to the Citizens Academy and I feel like I learned a lot, and yet I think there's still so much to learn. And I'm like, I've given up the other volunteer work that I've done. So I'm basically just focused on the police commission. So like, I want to devote my time to that. I want to keep doing that. I have a lot of follow-up that I want to do, and I would also just love to be providing Chair Boggs with ideas and giving advice, and also, you know, being there when you can't be there, and just being able to fill the gap. And also, I do not like the idea of running because I'm a woman, but I think that in the last meeting, the lady had said that she was being mansplained to, and I appreciated everything that she was saying. I also didn't understand why it is that she said that things are being mansplained, and I kind of wanted to say, well, I think what I wanted to be able to like kind of soften things over and say, you know, it's we really weren't trying to mansplain to you. We were just trying to get the meeting going because we don't have enough time. And I didn't feel like that was my position to say. But I think that I would feel a little bit more freedom to say that kind of thing in the future. And yeah, so do not vote for me because I'm a woman, by the way. But do consider that this is the only thing that I will be doing volunteer-wise. I'm no longer doing the climate action thing. And if I haven't updated my profile, please let me know. Well, I'll look myself actually. But yeah, so I've got all the time in the world for this. So please let me help. Thank you.
So at this time, we need to get the vote.
Chair, can I speak to the motion first?
Yes, you speak to the motion, please.
Thank you. So the reason I seconded this nomination, and the reason I've tried to recruit Bonnie to a leadership position since I was chair, is because we need to look to the future. We have a whole new set of folks on the commission, and in 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years, when Silver's time is up on the commission with all the great work that he's done, we will have a lack of experience at the top. And I would like to set a precedent, and I would like to start building new talent so that when we get to that place and Dallas has moved on to something else, Silver has moved on to something else, it doesn't just come down to me again, which is kind of what happened the first time. As much as I love being chair and as brilliant as I thought the opportunity was, I want to make sure we have a deep bench for the commission's future. Thank you.
Okay, so everyone has heard from everyone. So we need to go ahead.
Well, Commissioner V's hands up as well.
Why didn't you do that? You have someone else to nominate, V?
No, I just wanted to add that, you know, I hear you, Silver, I hear your point that you wanted to have, you know, you wanted to finish up on things that are, you know, undone, that you have on your slate. However, I think, you know, leadership should be made available to people on this board. And, you know, if there's no limit in terms, as far as how many terms you can serve, which we do have, then are you suggesting that you would like to stay on perpetually for however many years you're on this commission? That's my question. And if you don't, then what difference does it make to step aside so that somebody else can have a chance?
Yeah, so I was asked the question, so I should be allowed to respond to this.
Yeah, please, of course.
Yeah, please.
Yeah,
do.
no. So good question. No, I don't plan on being here in perpetuity, or however you want to say it. I definitely going to step down at the end of my time. I'm looking forward to that same coin that Michael, Dr. James Garcia has. And I've also sort of asked for our former interim, for Jeremy Cleversley to give me a personal pan pizza just because it was a joke, but for all the work that I've done. I do want to finish hard. And that's the thing. And I'm not going to give up at this point. I want to make sure that I see this final year, because it is going to be my time at the end of this year to make sure that that's done. And I would be willing to, in that time, take, Bonnie and share with her some of my experiences, share with her some of the things that I've seen taking place. It's not just the fact that I've been here for this long, but I've seen the institutional way that things have worked. And I've seen through 2 different chiefs how sort of the department kind of even takes change and takes shape. So, it's, for me, it's just about finishing strong. It's not about doing anything more than finishing strong. And I love terminology that would say, let's raise up a bench. I would love to see Bonnie in that position. I just want to finish out my position with this next year. That's it.
Well, do you remember when you and I ran for the same position, right?
Yeah.
You both got it. I actually stepped aside so that you could have, the vice chair all to yourself. I did it on my own. I did it on my own term. However, I think, we're just like what Sean was saying, we have to worry about the next generation of leaders.
I move to call the question. We don't need to turn this into a discussion.
Okay.
All right, we
All
don't-
Yeah, this is becoming
Anyway,
like a political thing.
That's all I wanted to say, but I appreciate you sharing what you shared. Thank
Yeah,
you. so
no,
much.
I definitely feel that we should have some new
I
leadership coming in.
respect you, Silvario. I respect you.
Yeah, no, it's
I love
fine.
you,
I
know.
see that, I hadn't, the only thing that I want to see done is make sure that we have some of our laid out plans take fruition. So,
Mhm. Okay.
That sounds great. So Holly, did you want to get, Winmar? Okay, all right, yeah.
I haven't received votes from quite a few of you, so I've only received 4 votes so far through email.
Make sure not to let anyone know who has inviting.
I think people were waiting to hear the speeches
Yeah.
and the balloons. There's no
Dr. Garcia,
balloons.
are you able to
Well,
vote?
that's
Dr. Garcia, I see you walking. Are you able to vote?
I have voted. I'm good.
and are we sending these in the email to Holly?
Yes.
And the only thing we're voting on is vice chair, because we already voted on chair.
Mhm.
Okay, I've heard from everyone. Would you like me to read the votes?
Yes.
Okay. We've received 7 votes for Commissioner Dominguez and 3 votes for Commissioner Mogart.
Okay, it looks like,
Congrats.
congrats. We have a new vice chair, Commissioner Bonnie Dominguez, and let's give her a hand.
Thank you very much. That's really nice of you. I will do my best.
And now it's time for me to close the vote. All those in favor of closing the election, say aye. Anyone opposed? The ayes have it. Congratulations, Bonnie. You are now the vice chair.
And thank you so much, Commissioner Mogart, for your
Yes.
time as vice chair.
Yes, and thank you very much, Silverio, for your time as vice chair.
Yep.
Okay, so we have liaison reports, and I'd like to start off with, and hopefully I'm able to, if not, hey, guess what? Fire me. Congratulations, Counselor Ye, on your recent election. So from me, congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you can start off with your any liaison reports you might have.
Sure, and Alan will fill in. I think the most relevant thing is we had the first of 2 meetings with the police auditor at council. She gave us a lot of background history about the Civilian Review Board and about her role and her office, which was very helpful. Counselors had a lot of questions, and she's going to be coming back with additional information, her own recommendations that she has, and I think some more discussion about the recommendations that came out of the ad hoc committee. So she will be coming back. So if you're following that, I don't believe it is scheduled yet, Alan. I think fall, right? You know? Yeah. Okay. But we will make sure to let you guys know when it gets scheduled.
Thank you. Councilor Zelinka?
I don't have anything to add to that.
Scott Lemon?
Thank you, Chair. So with the liaison reports, no news is good news. So I have a short report. There was no new bias crimes or incidents reported since we last met. The HRC, the Human Rights Commission, is still concerned about the growing trends in gun violence around the country, and we'll be keeping an eye on that. But that's a very short and succinct report for us today. Thank you.
Thank you. I can tell you, Commissioner Lemons, I'm gonna be forwarding you an email pretty soon. So of some bias. So be looking out for that.
Sure will. Thank you.
Dr. Garcia.
Yeah, so first off, I just want to say thank you for the kind words at the beginning of the meeting. It was unexpected for me, and I just want to point out a little bit of overstatement that there have not been countless issues that I have weighed in on, because it's easy to count. It's just been since January, but it was a wonderful experience these last 6 months, and I wish I could have served longer, but life happened, and I'm sure that the CRB will continue to be well represented. We have not met yet this month. This is one of those months where the CRB meets after the police commission, so we meet next week. I will be in town for that, and so maybe I can pick up my challenge coin then in person. I just couldn't get back in time for this meeting today. But I think that's all I have. I think I shared about the cases that we heard last month, so I will repeat that. And yeah, I'm going to eat now. That's what I was doing when I was walking. I was getting food. So I'm going to turn my camera off, but I will still be listening.
All right, thank you. Now to commissioner comments. Commissioner Mogar.
I don't have any comments.
Okay. Commissioner Nguyen.
No big comments except to just congratulate Bonnie Dominguez for being vice chair in this coming term.
Okay. Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, so I'm super glad we're still doing hybrid because when I got home, it is when I noticed that we had started meeting in person again. I recently got exposed to COVID, so I've been isolating and staying to myself. It's been over a week now, so I think I'm good, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. I do plan on seeing everybody in person. I think it is a very conducive way to conduct business and make sure we stay rolling. So I look forward to when we all feel safe and comfortable doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis.
I don't have any comments.
Commissioner Dominguez.
I'm also really happy that we are doing this hybrid, because I literally got off a meeting just before this and then just sat down here. And also thank you for everybody that spoke for my position. And also Silver, I would really like to talk to you about the plans that you have. And, you know, you know, put them forward and also to add to them, like whatever it is that I'm thinking too. So, yeah, so thank you so much for all the work you did. And yeah, so let's talk.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Mr. Wimbrough?
Hey, everyone. It's great to see folks both in person and online. Really a fan of hybrid meetings. Congratulations, Bonnie, on being elected vice chair. Really excited for your leadership. And thank you so much, Silver, for everything you've done during your term as vice chair. I'm really excited for y'all to work together. Just one quick comment. Apologize that I couldn't make our last meeting. I'll have to leave a little bit early tonight. It's finals week. I just have one more tomorrow to wrap things up in a bow. Just finished the Citizens Police Academy earlier this week. It was a really enriching experience. It's been a brutal spring term for me, so I couldn't make the Saturday meetings and some of the Monday meetings because of school. But I did really enjoy the Citizens Police Academy. It's going to take me a little while to kind of process everything I've learned. I think there's a ton for us to learn about the way that the department engages with the community and the lessons that we shared as a cohort through the class, and would love for some of the modules to be available online for folks to be able to peruse at their leisure, because I think that folks are more self-directed and want to be able to watch city council meetings or police commission meetings after the fact on YouTube. I think there's a portion of the population too that wants to be able to have that in-person dynamic, that kind of cohort cohesion and group learning in person. But I do think too that there's a lot of value to be attained, both from a community engagement perspective, for us as a commission to be able to provide those modules online virtually, so folks can be more engaged and up to date around what the department is doing, create that communication, but also it might prompt folks to join us at the commission during public comment and to be more engaged on components of policing that they really enjoy. So super valuable experience. Hats off to the department for putting it on. Ton of work, not just resources, but time and energy to be able to put the Citizens Academy on. But yeah, it's a wonderful experience, and would encourage anyone here to take it if they have the time to do so.
Great. And Commissioner Robertson, is she here tonight? Okay, so I'll be the last comments. Thank you very much for allowing me to continue, and hopefully I don't let you guys down and try to keep meetings exciting. I appreciate every one of you, and I value the things that you all bring to the table. Next, we have the chief's report. Now, before the chief begins, I want everyone to know that the two things that myself and Vice Chair Mogart wanted to hear about is two things that came to mind. They're right on the table. Was the unruly gatherings that have been going on around the University of Oregon. We want to hear more about that in his speech. And we also wanted to hear about school safety, because as you know, there's been some tragedies throughout the nation. And we want to make sure, we want to hear from him what's kind of going on as far as safety of our school. So without saying any more, let's begin with the chief's report. And I do think we'll be getting joined by Sergeant Soulsby.
Yeah, Sergeant Soulsby will be joining me. He's having a little bit of tough time getting on, so I forwarded him the link that you sent me, Holly. So we'll see if that gets him on.
So I don't want it to be misrepresented, Chief. I'm sorry, but Dallas, I said specifically, I didn't see school safety. I did say to comment on the Uvalde situation. Yes. And the black mark that the department there has taken upon itself.
And then I also want to share that Sergeant Soulsby, who will be joining us, is not only the training sergeant, but he is the Alice CERT training. He is what's the word saying? He's the expert dealing with the Alice CERT training, which goes over all these things dealing with school safety and so forth. So if you have any questions about this when he gets on, make sure we utilize him as much as we can. Chief, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Boggs. So looking at the agenda, I'll give you a few comments from a high-level view on what's going on with the organization, and then I will talk about Silver. I will talk about Uvalde and what we know. And there's still a lot that we don't know, and the Department of Justice is doing a fairly deep investigation there, but I'll talk a little bit about that situation and some of the things that, from my perspective, were probably not in place that would ensure a much better outcome. And then I'll also talk about kind of the trajectory around our unruly gatherings and some of the things that we've done throughout the last couple of weeks and kind of the trends that we're seeing in that area as we near the end of school. And so I'll try and hit all three of those. First and foremost, I think the commission would be pleased to know that hiring is continuing. We just recently moved forward several to the psych phase for police officer, and I have on my calendar in the not so distant future to hear from the psychologist on that, and then we're sending another batch through to the psychologist if I approve their backgrounds, and I'll be looking at backgrounds at the end of this month for another batch, and I just approved another opening of another recruitment. So you can imagine this recruiting team is just absolutely moving, trying to get people hired in this organization. And it's not just officer, we've got a ton of positions that are open that we need to hire for. And so they're tasked with an awful lot of that when it comes to overall recruitment in the department. The other thing I would mention is that we are working on a pay placement offer letter for two internal individuals to be promoted to captain. So I'm excited about that. You may have remembered that the Deputy Chief of Police, Stacy Jepson, has taken a job as the Chief of Police in Beaverton, and she started on Monday in Beaverton. I'm happy to report that I talked to her today, and she answered the phone, and I think the words out of her mouth was, "Oh my gosh, I've never been to so many meetings in my life." And so I said, "Welcome to being a chief." And so she's learning how that's going, and she's doing well up there, but that's left a void at that position. And my intention is to create an AIC position for deputy chief, and Captain Sean Adams will move up and be the deputy chief for the foreseeable future. And then we'll have two captains promotions. What that does in our department is it creates some movement underneath, both in lieutenant and then ultimately maybe in sergeant. And that can be really exciting for a department when you think about new leadership and grabbing newer, fresh, creative leaders in the organization. That is going to be something I will tackle at the end of the summer, because if you've been paying attention, you know we've got a couple of big events coming up next month, and we need to make sure that we're stabilized as best we can for the rest of this month, all the way through July, with a variety of things we're paying attention to. And then in August, September, I'll think about a sergeant's and a lieutenant's promotional process and see if we can get some new leadership up into the ranks of the organization. So some exciting times, lots of change. With change always comes uncertainty and a sense of in some respects, a lack of stability for some. That's the way they feel when there's this much change. But we're leading them through that change the best we can, and trying to be communicative and open about and transparent about what our intentions are around those positions. We just finished. It's not finished, but we've had most of our, if not all of our budget committee meetings. We're on the doorstep of the FY23 budget, which starts July 1st. And we'll kind of hit the ground running there. It's largely a status quo budget for us, with the exception of the addition of the Community Safety Initiative money, which is outside the general fund. And so when we hear people concerned about new money being added to the police department, that is specifically within the Community Safety Initiative as identified by council. And so we are continuing to work hard to hire those positions. I have 8 of the 13 CSOs in background right now for that CSO program, and I'm hopeful that all of them will pass that background, and we'll be able to pick 8 of those 13 off. And we've we're re-recruiting for more CSOs. So we'll have that program up and running this year for sure. We're sitting down, we're talking about uniforms, what they're going to drive, how they're going to look, what they're going to respond to, all of the stuff that you would expect we would have a conversation about with regards to alternative response. So the key here is to differentiate them from law enforcement so that people recognize them as a alternative response. And that's a delicate balance between how we keep them safe and give them tools to stay safe, because they are out in the community, they are confronted by people, they do deal with things that feel a little bit scary from time to time, and making sure that they're not seen as our armed, uniformed officers. So we're working on strategy for that and how that's going to maybe look and feel a little bit different. So excited about that program. We'll get making one other change, switching some leadership around and getting a different sergeant in the downtown core. That will be happening next week. We're mindful that our downtown core sees a lot of activity and some stressors through the late spring, summer, and this summer we think is going to be really active. We have the return of the country fair. We have Oregon 22 between the 10th and the 24th. And then we have the fair, the last 4 days of the World Games that we have to pay attention to. And the fairgrounds is a unique situation. In some communities, well, in most communities, the fairgrounds are owned by the county, and in some communities, it's actually a county island within the city, so it's actually their jurisdiction to patrol. In Eugene, it's incorporated into the city. It's their property, but just like any other property member or owner, they are afforded the protection of the Eugene Police Department. So we'll have to staff the fair this year as well. And after last year's shooting, you can imagine there's a little bit of sensitivity around safety. And what's going on right now nationally, it's front of mind. So we're going to try and get July here and behind us as quickly and safely as possible, and hopefully and make sure everybody has a really good experience. So I'm going to end there with my chief's report. Stop for just 2 seconds and see if there's any questions with respect to all things EPD before I move on. All righty. Let's talk about Texas.
I had a quick question.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
sorry.
So, go ahead.
What is going on with the situation with the shooting at the Wow Hall?
That's a great question. I just checked in on that actually last week with the AIC captain in charge of investigations. I'm not going to share too much because this is a public meeting, but what I will tell you is that right up until just a few weeks ago, we've been writing search warrants for locations and getting approval by the district attorney and judges to serve search warrants. So I think it's what I think I can say is that we have search warrants that we're ready to serve, and we're conducting some surveillance to make sure that we serve those at the right time. So I'm hopeful that we have some movement on.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Just as a follow-up to that, one of the things that was really unique about that investigation, maybe more than some of our recent investigations, was the amount of social media and cell phone data that we needed to get our hands on to put the pieces together. And every single one of those requires a preservation order and then subsequently a search warrant to extract the information. And getting those returns back from cell carriers and social media platforms takes months to be able to do that, because you can imagine the kind of legal things that they go through as a private entity on releasing personal information. So just a few moving parts to that one, but I'm pressing, Silver, I'm pressing, trust me. So let's talk about South Texas. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about, if you want to, about some of the training that we've been through and whether or not you feel like this organization is prepared for a similar type of situation, whether it's at a school or on campus or in your business, wherever people are gathering. When we think about active threats, we call them active shooters, but really they're active threats because they don't necessarily need to always be shooting to be taking people's lives as they're moving through areas that are populated. But when you talk about active threats, we train on that every single year. You saw in your packet, it's very timely. May of 22, just this last May, we did this, and This is Bill that's just joining us. Sergeant Soulsby's joining us. He's our training sergeant, very gifted tactician and operator, and we'll be happy to answer any specifics about the types of training that we have. But some of the things that high level overview, some of the things that we touch when we train and make sure our people are ready to go is training on leadership or on-scene leadership in crisis. And when you think about the single biggest, I think one of the single biggest determining factors of successful outcome. Now, when I say a successful outcome, that doesn't mean that there's no loss of life, because let's just be honest, if somebody wants to infiltrate and has bad intentions and has the means to take a life, before we're able to get mobilized, there's likely going to be serious physical injury or death. But to minimize the impact of that, the on-scene leadership is key. And if there's one thing that I've taken away from what I have known, and we're waiting for the full debrief on that situation, but one thing that I've taken away from the information that I've gathered is that there was a bifurcation of leadership. You had a police chief that was the school police chief with 6 officers in their department, and then you had the city police who was asked to come in, and oftentimes those smaller departments are not well trained or well equipped to deal with these types of things, nor have they been through other crises that have really honed those skills around what crisis leadership looks like, or how you lead through crisis, and how you open those lines of communication to make sure you get the right resources there and get the right information. And see what I think what you saw in that was a gap in potentially leadership, a gap in communication for sure, as far as the information, and then probably I think the DOJ will come out later with their findings, but it wouldn't shock me if there's going to be a gap in training and a gap in contemporary training around active threat or active shooter response. The other things that we trained on last month are shield deployment and rescue, whether that's officer rescue or a downed individual rescue. And oftentimes people are, they misunderstand what the goal is when we deal with an active threat like this. That injured person rescue is certainly important, but what is the primary goal of this is to stop the shooting, and you can do that a couple of different ways. You can separate the shooter from potential victims, or you can neutralize that particular shooter with a force on force option. And so that's kind of the primary goal when we go in. Oftentimes when we do these is that we start in, and this is what you saw in Texas, and what their belief was, is that what started out as an active scenario, an active threat, transitioned into what we call an armed barricade, which basically means an individual who is armed that has barricaded themselves in some area or piece of geography, but there's no imminent threat to another human being. And when that happens, we have a tendency to slow things down at that point because we have the benefit of time and distance to be able to try and successfully resolve that and negotiate that person out and into custody without taking another life. That would be our primary goal. And what you saw in Texas is you saw a police chief, a school police chief, who was either given bad information or made some really bad assumptions that this had transitioned from an active shooter situation to a barricaded subject. And that's when you saw him slow things down. And that's where you started hearing about the hour to the hour and a half it took before officers went back into the building. But we train on the ability to drift in and out of those situations, starting active and transitioning to barricade, or maybe starting barricade and transitioning back to active, and the techniques that we need to be able to do that. The other thing that they always touch on that, and I'll turn it over to you here in a second, Bill, because I think you'll probably have a couple things you want to say, is tourniquet application. We know that there's going to be injury. We know that there's going to be seconds that we need to be able to stop the bleed. And so we are a big organization around saving lives through tourniquet application and how quickly we can put tourniquets on bleeds for anybody, both officer and civilian alike. And so officers carry that ability to do that. And so we train on that, make sure that they know how to apply those, where to apply them, so that they can be successful. And then of course, the last thing I'll say is unfortunately, there are times where law enforcement will end the situation with a force on force application. And many of those, because of the dynamic and dangerous nature of the situation, that it's a lethal force or a lethal force option. It doesn't necessarily mean it ends in death for the shooter, but it could be a lethal force option for that individual. And so we train on the appropriate use of that, and when and where and how that may will be justified when we have to do that. So Bill, let me pause there, because I'd hate for you to be a guest here and never say anything. So let me pause there and just give you a chance to just talk a little bit about, maybe talk to the commission about what you're seeing in the department with regards to their competency, how hard they train, your level of confidence in their ability to respond to these types of things. And you're muted, of course.
There you go. Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Oh.
Late, I had a little technical difficulty. It's good to be with you guys. I wanted to expound a little bit on what the chief stated earlier about some of the outcomes that can occur on these events. And he left out one, but there's really three outcomes when there's an active shooter or a active violent incident. The police force an encounter or force, and there's, like the chief said, there could be that deadly force encounter, which takes the shooter away from doing the damage to the community and directs it towards the police. We want that. We want that to occur. That's one of our goals. The other part of that is with that pressure from the police, knowing that they're there and that they're coming for them, is that oftentimes statistically they commit suicide. That is one of their exit strategies. The other out of the three that can occur is what the chief already mentioned, is that barricaded subject where there's not any other life, like he stated. It would be a hostage barricade, which would still be, because of the earlier actions on the person, we can still consider that, even if there was one person in there, based on the other actions that the person was taking, we would still consider that an active shooter, and we would continue to force an encounter with that subject. And then the third is with the police arriving on scene and being aggressive and trying to find this person, it often dislodges them and they go into the community, and they're in the, fighting for their own life and fleeing from the scene, which stops that carnage. And that's our other goal. So those three things can occur at those incidents. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. You can just interrupt anytime, but I'll go on to the training. We've been training our officers in active shooter response at the PD since 2000, after Columbine. And the program, I inherited the program in 2002. And we've just constantly been building and refreshing that program with outside entity, National Tactical Officer Association. There's a program out of Texas. It's ALERT, ALERRT. That is the adopted program of FBI. And and the third portion of our training that we've kind of gleaned stuff from is out of Portland Police Bureau, and basically that whole metro area. So out of those three entities, we've kind of settled on what we teach and how we teach our response. And it's just gotten better and better with more time and experience in preparing officers for this kind of encounter. One thing I wanted to touch on is, and I spoke to the chief about this earlier, but we don't bring enough attention to this. And this really was at the forefront of Uvalde. The chief spoke about the leadership on the scene, which was a huge portion, but I would say the other half of that portion was the lack of breaching capability. As he stated, we're still waiting for the brief to come in, all the details, but I know from Border Patrol connections through Portland and ones that we had here at EPD that it was a steel door. I believe it opened out. I'm not positive on that, but that causes an issue too with a steel frame, like most school doors. They're constructed for fire, so it's a good barrier when it's locked. I know that they were having issues getting into that room, and the way they finally got into it, at least by the intel that we have so far, is from, they call it BORTAC, it's Border Patrol Tactical, and they had the capabilities to breach that door. And that's finally how they got in once the decisions at the leadership level were made. So to talk a little bit about our capabilities, we have about 10 vehicles that are, we call them response vehicles. They're staffed by either detectives that are SWAT members, or officers that are SWAT members, training staff that are SWAT members, and supervisors that are SWAT members. And those vehicles have varying degrees of capability for breaching, from mechanical breaching tools all the way up to explosive breaching capability. And in there is ballistic, and we have some mechanical, also has hydraulics with it. So we have a pretty robust breaching program here, which we've lacked in the past. And we're on a really good path right now because of funding and because of leadership allowing us to have those capabilities. So I can with 100% confidence tell you that what happened at Uvalde about them not being able to get in the door in that hour and whatever time it was, we would have capabilities to get in most doors. I'm not going to say all, because there's always that exception, but a large percentage of any door in 15 to 20 minutes for a difficult door. And we have capabilities that would be on scene within that 2 to 5 minutes for the majority of doors. So we're setting good. We're not where we need to be. I think we can always get better, but we're at a good position when it comes to breaching. And breaching can't be, it's a very basic thing, but it can't be ignored. If you can't get in, you can't help. So, and that's kind of the basic rule.
I have a question. So my first question is this: how many schools in Eugene are you, if this were to happen in Eugene, are you responsible for, or you would get the call for? How many schools?
You mean the actual number, or just the, I mean, we run all of 4A, we run all of Bethel. There's also some little boutiques.
So the main reason why I'm asking this question is that obviously it's a lot of schools. Do you go to those schools yourself and check for safety? When you say these doors, to recommend to that school, this, you need to change this, or you recommend to this school things? Or
so
do we wait for an event to happen and then we go back and say, okay, now we should have did this, coulda, woulda, shoulda, whatever. So my question is, what type of things at the school are you proactive doing as far as the ins and the outs? So so there wouldn't be a surprise. Nothing would be a surprise at the school, because you would know all the ins and outs of the school. Have y'all done that?
So I think there's a couple questions in there. One is, do we give what we call site assessments to schools to tell them where their weak points in for security on a perimeter, those open door gates? So that's one part of it. The other part is are we familiar with the schools? So I'll answer the first. Is that correct? Am I with you? Okay. So I'll kind of start with the most recent. Bethel School District, Willamette High School principal, now I forget their names, and the actual superintendent reached out to me 3 months ago, and I did a full school assessment on their structure. So how the school's laid out, capabilities of people getting in, ingress, egress, that kind of stuff, and made several recommendations, wrote a report up and gave them a report. So they were very proactive with that. That isn't the first time we've done an assessment for Willamette High School. But I think they're actually going to try to make some changes. And in that, we make suggestions on redundant communication, to the masses, outer security, which, the fences, that type of stuff, and then inner security, as far as like the outer doors of the school, and then inner, how do the classrooms work? How do you lock a classroom door? How do you get out of a classroom if it's an interior? All those kind of things. We make recommendations. And so that's the most recent. We went to go back when we introduced Alice. Are you guys familiar with Alice?
I would tell everyone what Alice is.
So Alice is a program. It's a private company that started a program, and it's geared towards active shooter response by civilians in the school setting from high school down, to daycare type things. And it's geared in a way for the teachers or instructors, and then what the students do based on that. So it stands for alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. There's a whole program for it, and EPD is licensed in teaching that, and we're licensed in teaching that to nonprofit entities, schools, churches, that kind of stuff. And we've been teaching that. Captain Mozan and I have been teaching that, and other instructors, but we're the lead instructors for here in Eugene for 12 years or so, 15 years, maybe not that far, 12 years. We trained all of 4J staff and all of Bethel, and then some of those, like I call them boutique schools, those other schools, several years ago. And we've done some refreshers over the years. To be frank with you, Bethel has continued that relationship and 4J has not. And I won't get into the reasons. I don't know what the reasons are, but that's kind of how it's setting. I know that 4J and Bethel both have what's going to happen. What do they do with the students? What are the directions? How do they do their lockdowns? All that kind of stuff. I know they have a program in place for that. I don't know exactly what 4J's is, if they've deviated from the Alice train or not. I know that the Bethel School District has not deviated from that. So that's kind of the inner workings of that. As far as officers knowing the schools, the officers, most police officers, I would say a very large percentage of patrol officers are very familiar with the schools, how they're going to get in, how they're going to go in and take care of what they need to take care of. And they're taught very quick measures on doing that. I'll give one, for instance. They're taught haven't done this in a few years, but they're taught how to do a vehicle penetration into a building. It sounds odd, but if you can't get in through the two double doors, you drive the car in and you back it out. It takes the two doors down. It's very simple. There's a lot of mechanics with that and a lot of safety with that, but in those kind of situations, that is something that's doable. So officers, I think you should feel very confident if they need to respond to something, they're going to be able to navigate a school and get where they need to get.
There's some hands up. I want to make sure, and thank you for that. My only recommendation is any school that you don't know if they're doing something or anything like that, now's the time that we find out if they're doing it.
Right.
There shouldn't be a gray area on that. I mean, it'd be like, okay, this school check, these three right here, no, then there needs to be a conversation. That's my suggestion. Commissioner Nguyen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There has been, I'm sure most of you are aware of this, but there has been over 250 mass shooting this year alone, and we're only halfway through the year. It just seems like, every time I see this on the news, an active shooting event, it's devastating for the community. So I'm also aware that there are some, departments out there that are doing training for the communities. There are flyers, there are brochures, even the FBI website, has information on what to do if you're ever in an active shooting event. But I'm wondering, are these information actually helping at all? Is there any data that says, prior to the information on hide, run, and fight, if you have that information out there now, and most schools have been teaching their students this and their faculties, but I'm wondering, has there been any success stories?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll make a comment on the first part of your question or statement on, do we provide civilian training outside of those schools and type stuff? Yes, we do. And you're well versed on it. That Run, Hide, Fight program is a free program. It was done by the Department of Justice, I believe, and Houston Police Department is how it first started. And that video, if you look up Run, Hide, Fight on YouTube, there's one. If you look at the Houston PD one, it starts out with a dark clothed guy in a looks like a library or a office building. So that's, you're looking at the right one if that's it. But yes, we have a program that's based on that run, hide, fight that we teach to citizenry. The problem with it is, and it sounds a little cliche in the way that things are going these days, but time and money constrains us on being able to reach out to everybody in the community. So I've got 3 right now in the queue that are requests that I'm fielding since this Uvalde thing that I'm preparing to teach me and my staff. And on the second part of it, so yes, I've been teaching, and my staff has been teaching in Eugene for probably the last 10 years to citizenry outside of nonprofits, medical facilities, banks, register guards, stuff like that. So we've been doing that for a long time. It's lacking, there's no doubt about it, but we have been making it attempt the best we can with fulfilling those requests. On the second part of it, we have a long history of, unfortunately, of how these incidents play out and the reactions of police responding to these, how they react with the person. And we can, out of that, we can predict behavior. And the run, hide, fight and the Alice program, which is really the same thing, one just sounds nicer, are very effective for your basic run-of-the-mill Uvalde kind of guy. And I say guy because it's 98% males that do this. So yes, the traditional, it's unfortunate to say these words, but the traditional active shooter in the United States, the run, hide, fight, and the Alice does work. As the chief stated earlier, you're never going to stop all the casualties. But what run, hide, fight does is if a person chooses to do this, we can minimize that greatly with those concepts. And I wouldn't teach it if I didn't think it worked. And it shows time and time again that it does work. Now, it has to work coupled with good law enforcement response. You can't just have the citizenry doing that, because we teach them that, you got to kind of stand the ground and do what you need to do, run, hide, fight during that first 2 to 3 minutes in Eugene until the police can get there and put pressure on this person. And we know statistically that pressure causes them to do one of those 3 things that I already stated. So yes, in a short answer, I know I talk a lot, but yes, that it does work.
Mr. Shivers?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the first thing you said that I was very glad to hear you say, because I brought it up at our last month's meeting, was that one of the reasons that you apply pressure is to change the direction of force to be yourselves. You're putting yourselves in the line of fire. I saw that our de-escalation policy later clarifies around that a little bit. And I think one of the barriers to implementing this run, hide, fight model and these trainings is not just time, it's not just money, it is community trust. And it is unfortunate that officers here are fighting the distrust generated by officers in Texas. That is, one of the things we have to combat, and one of the reasons that we're all working on this together. But I also want to be very clear that the solution to these things is not crisis intervention. Crisis intervention is great and unfortunately needed, but gun control is the solution, and gun control is not something that we on the commission have any power over. So the things we do have power over, I'm wondering how the conversation around school resource officers has been impacted by the Uvalde incidents, and how the equity of application and access to these resources are playing out throughout the community. What I imagine is that North High School has gotten lots of training because they've requested it, and folks in other areas are less eager to call the police for proactive training on the matter. And I was hoping maybe this is a question for Chief, actually.
Yeah, let me take this one, Sean. So let me be real clear with respect to the school district. What I would say is our relationship and our level of engagement and desired engagement at the school level, the administrator level, is very, very high. Every single principal I talk to is happy to welcome us in the building, happy to have us do site assessments and instruct on things. They call us on serious kids in school with gun calls all the time, and that the school administrators, principal, vice principals, counselors, teachers, that relationship is very, very strong and very, very supportive of us coming when appropriate and being on campus when appropriate to be able to help them with the safety of their campus. The disconnect, I think, is between some of the policy-making body and the belief that school youth services officers, this isn't everybody because Bethel has taken a little bit of a different approach, but the presence of a youth services officer on campus outweighs, or the negative impacts of having a police officer on campus outweighs the, I think in their mind, the very low frequency opportunity for something like this to happen. And so to answer your question, we have not been re-engaged as a result of Uvalde. We've not been re-engaged on what youth services looks like in the 4J district. We've actually been engaged with Bethel preliminarily on how to add a second youth services officer to help serve the Bethel district better.
Have you, sorry to interrupt, but have you heard calls from the community to re-engage that? Or is that not a concern that the community is expressing right now?
Yeah, no, I think it's fair to say that there's segments of our community that are expressing a concern about us stepping back from that. And then others would tell you that having police officers on campus don't prevent this from happening. And so we hear both sides of that. What I will say is, in these situations, and as gruesome as this is to talk about, and as hard of a topic as this is to talk about, is that there's a high percentage of these things get ended with death by suicide. And the death by suicide, generally speaking, is a result of some pressure that law enforcement puts on the suspect.
Was there an SRO at Uvalde?
Well, they had an entire school police department with 6 officers and a chief. I don't know. I do believe there was a school officer on campus, yes. But they have a separate police department. They're like the University of Oregon Police Department. They have that in their public school district in Uvalde. So when they hear them talk about the chief of the school district, it's the chief of the school district, not the chief of the city that serves that 16,000 people that live in Uvalde.
So isn't part of the conversation of the failure that officer didn't engage with that suspect?
Well, I don't know if he didn't engage, chose not to engage, undertrained, bad information. It could be any one of those things. And I don't know the answer to your question, Silver, whether or not, to what extent he was involved in that, or what he chose not to do. And I'm sure that'll come out in the investigation. It's not uncommon. I mean, you've seen the stories. It's not uncommon for people to not engage, unfortunately. I hate to admit that, but every once in a while you have those instances where somebody doesn't engage when they're supposed to. And I think it's a testament, oftentimes in the early days of the school resource officer program, that program was seen as a place for departments to send, let me put it this way, it's not necessarily their best and brightest that started that program. Nowadays, you have some of the absolutely best and brightest police officers that are choosing to want to engage and be a part of kids' lives in that fashion. Navasha Tester is a great example of that in Bethel. She is the school resource officer in Bethel, and she's there because she wants to be there. She wants to make a difference in kids' lives. And I'll tell you, there's going to be no not engaging with Navasha Tester. Trust me. So that will take care of itself. But it'll be interesting to see that outcome, Silver, from DOJ, to see to what extent that youth services officer or SRO, if he is on campus or she was on campus, if they engaged her video.
Yeah, well, there were two conflicting stories initially that came out.
It
And,
always seems to be, doesn't there?
what she was going to finally drop in the end.
Yeah.
Commissioner Wynn, you have your hand up. Go ahead and speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I am wondering, because I'm really worried regarding the education material on hide, run, fight, training and whatnot. I'm worried that the seniors, particularly the minority community, seniors in minority communities, I don't know if they know the information. I don't know if they've been reached out to. I'm not seeing a lot of materials out there in multilingual, flyers or brochures or anything like that. Right after the Uvalde shooting, I call up my sister. We were talking about something else, and I happened to ask her, "Do you know what to do if you're at a shopping mall or you're at work and an active shooting happened?" She said no. And I described to her, the method of hiding. If you can't hide, then you want to run. If you can't run, then you fight. She was, really puzzled by the whole thing. So I'm wondering, are we doing outreach to the minority community and producing multilingual type educational materials to give out? Especially, reaching out to certain organizations. And I've mentioned this before, the Oregon Chinese Coalition is one of them that you can reach out to. They would be happy to get their members together. And my hope is that, the people who do attend the training can then, educate other people they know. And then it's cascading effect. Yeah, so I'm wondering if you have any information on that.
Are you speaking to me?
You, Bill, and
yeah,
also the chief, if he wants to add anything.
I don't have information on that. I know in the past we've had some booths over the years that have had been staffed by trainers. I haven't had any specific. I'll be honest with you. Our training, as I stated before, has been limited to people requesting it, and then us fulfilling that request. I would be happy if you send me an email to reach out to that group you were discussing there. I'd be happy to present to them. But if we started advertising tomorrow, send us a group. We'll be happy to do whatever we need to do in the community. We would be overwhelmed to the point where we would be, over promising and under delivering to a point that it would just be devastating. I think it'd be more harm than good with that. But I think it's a great point. It's probably a hole we need to fill for sure. But in the short term, email me and send me that group a contact, and I'll reach out to them for sure. But I think it's something we need to discuss, and this is not going to go away. Being more robust in our outreach is probably a good thing for us.
One of the things that's really interesting about the Run, Hide, Fight mantra is it's certainly great advice for anybody to have some exposure to that, so that at any moment, anywhere they are, they have some context for what they think they should do. But where it really, really does make a difference is when it's geography specific. When people that are in a building that they're in, so many hours of their professional lives that they know that building, so they know where to run to, they know where they can hide, and then ultimately where they might find anything at their disposal to fight with. And so that's really where we've kind of focused our attention, is trying to come into these organizations that have campuses and buildings and hospitals and schools, so that we can talk about ingress, egress. If you were to have to run and then hide and fight, where would that be? Where would your exit strategy be? Where would your unification point be in the event that you had to unify parents with kids and or other things like that? And so I think we've really geared our training towards organizations that are trying to bring us into their institution so that they can apply those principles on a geography-based approach, which really becomes effective for them.
So what I'm hearing, Chief, is workplace or schools or campuses, things like that, or malls where people are working at and stuff like that. But I was hoping that, you know, some of the information is transferable. It doesn't matter if you learn it at work. When you're going to the mall, you would still have that information in your head.
It is absolutely transferable. It's just if I'm at Washington Square and something's going, well, maybe I'm not a great example, but if somebody's at Washington Square on their way to do some shopping and shots ring out, you know, the first thing they do is they're scrambling around saying, okay, where should I hide? You know, where should I run to? Where should I hide? And so the fact that they're thinking about running and hiding and then ultimately fighting is beneficial. I think my point is that you can cut down that decision-making time when it's in an institution and it's like shots ring out or the lockdown goes into effect and they know immediately. Let me just give you a quick story. 2014, Reynolds High School. Shooter comes in with an AR-15 at 8 o'clock in the morning, immediately shoots 2 students, and then is moving down the hallway. SROs immediately engage him, and he, because of the pressure, barricades himself in a bathroom. The point I'm going to tell you about is the principal of that high school, who I'm really close friends with, and I actually responded to that all the way from Richland, Washington. It was the longest and fastest code run I've ever made. Would tell you 2 things that minimized the carnage in that. Number 1 was communication. The fact that his staff was so well trained, they knew exactly what to do, when to do it. They stayed off the phones, they stayed off the radio, and they did what they were supposed to do in a lockdown, and that saved lives. The other one, which was really interesting, is 75 kids that were in the gym right next to where the shooting happened in this bathroom where this kid ended up going, put themselves in lockdown without any adult supervision because they knew exactly where to go and how to do that. So when you think about minimizing damage, I can't emphasize enough that law enforcement is a piece of this, but the bigger piece of this is demanding that our schools train on these types of principles. And it's scary that we have to do that. But you know what? We do fire drills every single month in our schools by statute. You know, the last time we lost a kid because of a fire? Hundreds of years ago. When was the last time we lost a kid from gunfire? Last week? Right. So we need to change the mentality of where, you know, where we're putting our training in our schools and and how we can minimize the damage. And we're a piece of that, but the schools have to be prepared with all hazard preparedness. And I think that we continue to encourage and empower them to do that.
Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, I think, you know, I used to work on the national level of politics, political campaigns, traveled around the country to work on these things. And as I got older, I focused more locally, and comparing school shootings to natural disasters is incredibly tragic. It shows us the limit of our response. And just to clarify what I was saying earlier, I think it's Pride Month. The Pulse shooting was not that long ago, and the trust of police within the queer community is low. And so when I think about how this body can make progress, how we can help, it is increasing the trust and accountability of our department and our communication with our community. So I hear what Silver was saying of SROs not being the direction that 4J wants to go. And I think, you know, we need to listen to our community and to the elected leaders within 4J and do the best we can with what we have here on the commission. And I'm kind of on a soapbox, but I'm really glad to have this group to do it with.
Okay, so I think that we're going to move on. We have de-escalation policy 820. Its final review.
Chair Boggs.
Yes.
Chief Skinner was going to touch briefly on the unruly gatherings in the U of O.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up. My only thing is on that before he begins is the $375 and whatever measures that are when an unruly gathering happens. When was that put into place? Because it appears to me, I'm looking at it, that this is something that got put into place 10, 15 years ago, whatever. Maybe $375 was a deterrent, but that's not now. So do you have any information on that?
The only information I have on that is judicial prerogative to set those limits. And so it would take legislative action on behalf of our municipal court judge and ultimately our council to adopt anything different than what the ordinance states now. So if there's some interest and some desire to approach that differently with respect to the maximum fine levied there, then that would be work that would be done out of the courts and with our elected officials.
Okay. And if you have anything you want to share on that, I'm willing about
Yeah,
what y'all are doing.
The only thing I would finish saying about unruly gatherings is I'm proud to say that we, I'm never proud when we have to issue citations and have to break up parties. I get it. We're a college town. Kids are going to have fun. I know this might shock you all, but I remember when I was in college having the same kind of fun. Well, not exactly the same kind of fun. I was a little bit more respectful, but I was having fun. And so we don't want to do that. The good news is the University of Oregon has really come alongside of us as a partner. And on a couple of occasions when we've had some dedicated resources in the area using analytics to identify some of the problem houses that we know that we've had over the last 10 years, is that their Office of Student Conduct has ridden along with officers, and they're getting firsthand look at kind of the types of behavior that are going on. And they're doing a really good job of helping us with identifying students, and then they take it from there. And in some cases, the Office of Student Conduct and the sanctions the university can have far outweighs anything we could do in the judicial system. And we're happy to pass that off to them if they feel like they can remedy that and change behavior. So we're working closely with them as well as the University of Oregon PD to do that. Our numbers have gone down drastically. We're getting close to the end of the year. People are getting ready to leave campus. And we'll have these conversations as we ramp back up in September with football and everything else. And then when we're back in person on campus. But I'm pleased with the response. I'm pleased with people changing their behavior and choosing to still enjoy themselves, but not let it get out of control. And I'm really pleased with the University of Oregon wanting to be a partner in this.
Okay, moving on. We are on the de-escalation policy 820, and I'm going to have Sergeant Smith take us from there.
Hello, everyone. Holly's going to help me out since we're on the hybrid. She's going to share her screen so that those of you that are joining us on Zoom can see the revised version of the policy. Mr. Haynes Garcia, I took your comments and ran back to our crisis negotiations team. I don't know if Sergeant Raffy is on the call tonight, but he is.
I am. Hi, Julie.
Hello. Hi. He's on as the expert here. Let me get rid of. So we're really going to focus on the section that that Commissioner Haynes Garcia was really commenting about, and that's the 820.3.1. Holly, if you could scroll down, and really going over where we expanded on the de-escalation techniques. The verbiage that was in there prior to on the last version, Chief Skinner made an excellent comment about we tend to think about the internal process of this and use verbiage that's very technical. So we went back to the drawing board and actually used verbiage that was outfacing that and made more, I guess, common use of the words. And so I'm going to let Brandon kind of talk about the FBI's active listening skills that were utilized to help incorporate on these strategies.
Sure. So when it comes to the active listening skills, if we remember at the last time this topic was brought up, one of the commission members frankly did a fantastic job of summarizing what each of those are. And the parallel between the active listening skills as we utilize them in law enforcement and on the clinical side that was described to the group are virtually identical. When we're talking about active listening skills, we're using verbiage techniques to just basically encourage someone to keep talking to us. We're using techniques that are listed, as you can see them on there. Minimal encouragers, open-ended questions, reflecting, mirroring, emotional labeling, paraphrasing. Those are all ways that we can encourage someone to continue to talk to us. But at the same time, there are manners that help us ensure that they know that they are being listened to. It helps us as the listener to stay engaged with that person. And so it's kind of this two-way street. They're being reinforced to keep talking. They're being encouraged that they are being listened to, and it helps focus us by utilizing those techniques to pay better attention to the person who's talking to us.
Holly, will you kind of scroll down to the next section? Yeah, go ahead. So in this hybrid here, it's kind of hard to know that they're, especially since she's sharing her screen, on if there's comments or questions in regards to what was added. I'm interested to hear from Commissioner Haynes Garcia, if he's still on, to know if this was what he had in mind when he made the comments last meeting.
Yes, sorry, I was switching from phone to computer, so I am here. Yeah, and yes, this is great. This looks wonderful and much less confusing to me.
Right, thanks. Holly, can you scroll just up a little bit? There you go. Okay, just keep it right there. Does anyone else have any questions or comments about the revisions that were made?
Right now, I can't see your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So yeah, we were sent the old version of this, and I would have to say that this is much more thorough, and y'all did an amazing job with it. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Is there any other comments?
The only thing that I wasn't, I think that many, some of the comments in the last meeting regards to, I think that there was some concern that some of the things weren't absolute. And I think we tend to want to be absolute that if officers don't do this, then they must be held accountable. And unfortunately, we can't be absolute. And to kind of give an example, is in an active shooter situation, I mean, that's exactly a situation where we're not going to be able to employ de-escalation techniques at the given moment when we arrive. And so we could write the policy and then write 20 different exceptions where, well, except for this situation, you don't have to use it, except, but we can't. I mean, so I did take that into consideration, but I could not figure a good way to incorporate that with, so I left the wording in regards to when to consider a disengagement plan is that officers should consider, and because that's what they should be considering every time, is that de-escalation and this disengagement plan. I think that's the
Yeah, we got hands now. Okay, Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah. I was just going to bring up what Julie was talking about. I wasn't saying that we should make it, absolute. I was saying that some of the exception or some of the language in here is redundant. For example, with B, when practical and appropriate is redundant with the above reasonably or objectively reasonable language. So it wasn't that that the section C needs to be absolute. It's that the very first paragraph of the policy gives the same information, that this only applies when it is objectively reasonable. The other thing I would ask is that in the future, the updated one be, I don't know if I'm looking at an old one, but be included in our packet so that I can read it beforehand. I came in here all ready to get upset because I saw the old one in here, and I had a bunch of complaints, but haven't had a chance to read this updated one yet.
Commissioner Dominguez.
Same thing. I had comments on the other one, and now I don't know what to comment on because I haven't read this one. Like the little that I've read, I'm like, that sounds good. Like, so to understand to see if I'm understanding correctly. So 820.3.1 has been replaced with the language that Commissioner Garcia was suggesting. Haynes Garcia was suggesting. Is that right? Oh yeah, that it is. Wait, is it? Yes. Reflecting mirror. Yeah, there you go. Okay, good. Okay, perfect. Great. And then I think I was just curious. So you'd also, in the thing that we did get sent, it does say that there is a consideration for using the ad hoc committee language for A and B. Is this actually in this version that you were showing us?
Yes. During the rewrite of this policy, that was what the ad hoc committee recommended, is that the previous version that was published of this policy was lacking, and it needed to be more thorough and give more direction to officers on to employ de-escalation techniques. And so that was taken into consideration when I rewrote the policy.
Sorry, so specifically the language that says A, all attempts shall be made to carry out law enforcement by non-violent means, add to A 20.3, and B, officers will apply use of force only after attempts at de-escalation have been exhausted or deemed not possible. So sorry, was that actually put in there somewhere?
Unfortunately, I don't know what you are reading off of.
Are you reading off the new policy?
I'm reading off of the sheet right before the old policy that was given to us. It says issue statement. This agenda item is to conduct a final review of the draft de-escalation policy A20 to include new language stemming from House Bill 4301. So de-escalation policy A20 final draft review. So that's right before the actual policy. It's at sheet page 5.
4, I
I have
believe.
3 pages.
Are you referring to the AIS? Where it states
Yeah.
the ad hoc committee on police policy.
Somebody said yes. I don't know. I actually don't know. How do I share this with you?
I
So
can't.
it's under the agenda. Yeah, agenda item summary is the AIS that
Oh,
Holly's
yes.
referring to. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, yes, thank you.
Took me a second too.
Thank you. Are you seeing that now?
I think what our attempt is to recognize that the ad hoc policy, police policy recommendation specifically offered this language as a recommendation.
Yes, it looks like it.
And what I think what we're trying to do is take a look at this recommendation and the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish with these recommendations and incorporate them into our escalation policy. But that doesn't mean that we've taken the recommendation verbatim and embedded it into the policy.
Oh, okay, that's what I was asking, if it was actually included in there, because again, I didn't get this draft. Okay, yeah, because I guess my comment for that was that it seems that 820.3, as you can see right there, right under physical force, that sentence right there could be replaced fairly easily with A and B. I don't see anything wrong with it. I think that it's more verbose and I think it's unnecessary. But I think that I don't think it would do any harm for the ad hoc committee's contribution to be placed in there. I think it would be nice, I guess is what I'm getting at, is that they did the work, they put it in there. It's basically the same thing. It's more verbose, but it's basically the same point. I don't think it does any harm. So I think it would be fine if that was placed in place of that sentence right below. Where it says 820.3 physical force. That's what I think. And then the last thing. Wait, no, not yet. Okay. And then I just had a question also about, what was it? I have a question about F and G. G, mostly, I just don't understand what it means, like what it's saying. So if somebody could explain what G means.
Okay, so do you want to know what F or G?
I'd start with G just because that one's like completely just blank in my mind.
Okay, so I'm going to read it so that everybody, I mean, obviously it says officers should consider a disengagement plan when the benefits to be gained by the police intervention are clearly outweigh the risks associated with the call. And I think in a nutshell with that is that if we're trying to engage a person that's in crisis and it's become a situation that's dangerous to the person or to the officers or to the community, that it may be better to back off and disengage from that contact with that individual as an alternative to bring that person down from crisis versus continuing to push the person into a communication standpoint that could cause them to act out even more. And Sergeant Rath, do you want to expound on that?
Sure. I think the classic scenario where something like that's going to be considered, we will at times get dispatched to a scene where someone's being reported as suicidal and potentially armed. It's not verified whether they are or not. If it's a potentially armed person, if there's a reasonable expectation that there could be a weapon involved, it's not going to be an appropriate situation for cahoots to go out to because they're not equipped or protected appropriately for that situation. So that would be where we would send a patrol officer or a CIT officer. Very quickly, we can evaluate that when we get there if our presence and our attempts to contact and aid that person is basically escalating. They're getting more agitated and scenes becoming less safe. There's no real governmental interest for us to continue to push that. Right? We're not gonna kick a door down and drag someone out and make that worse for them. That's only going to increase the crisis for that person. And quite frankly, usually, or rather potentially could end in harm to one of the officers or harm to the other person. If they frankly just don't want to talk to us, they don't want to engage, but there's no other nexus, there's no one else in the house with them, there's no other person involved, we're going to back out. We're going to offer any type of services that we can. We're going to encourage them to reach out to cahoots or other counseling services, but we're going to pull the plug and walk away from that because it's not worth continuing to make that situation more stressful for the person and then potentially have some sort of tragedy happen.
Thank you for explaining. And then for F,
Okay.
For F, oh, sorry.
That's all right. For F, when force is used, the amount of force used, including the number of officers who use force, shall be reduced as resistance decreases. Only amount of force reasonably assessed to maintain control should be used.
And so if you could just refresh me, because it's been a while. So for the use of force thing, is this kind of, I guess my question is, who is the one that's assessing the situation? As you know, like the situations get heated. So I guess I was just wondering who is actually doing the assessment.
all officers on scene are continuing to assess. There's going to be officers assessing, supervisors that are assessing. And I think in this paragraph we're talking about is that, well, I'll use an example. If we have somebody that we get a call of a person in crisis standing in the middle of the street, we want the amount of officers there that are going to make it safe for the community and safe for the person. But we don't want to bring the entire police department there to cause the person to continue to ramp up more in crisis because of the amount of people there. So as the situation continues to de-escalate and come down, then we may reduce the amount of officers that are there. And so that's what that's saying, is as the situation continues to calm down, we will reduce the amount of officers. If the situation escalates, there may be a need to bring up additional officers in. So it's kind of a flex depending on what happens at the scene.
So is there an officer that's always, I guess, necessarily not engaged in the physicality of a situation? That is there always like an officer that's kind of standing off to the side, kind of observing to see? It's just like, okay, maybe you guys are getting a little too hot over there. Like that's too much. Like, is there somebody that kind of has the cool head? Because when I was in the class, they were talking about how like they switch off officers when an action's happening, like you want to disengage some of them because like, like I think, was it adrenaline's pumping or whatever, but like they get like cycled out. So what I was wondering is like, who is doing the assessment? Because some of them will be in the heat of the moment. If you needed to tackle somebody, for example, like things got a little, they did escalate. I guess, did that make sense? Is there an officer that's always standing back that has like the cool head?
I'm going to let Sergeant Ratty explain from a CNT perspective on a scene.
Here we go.
Sergeant Ratty.
So, I guess it kind of depends on the situation. If we're going with the example of a disorderly person in the middle of the street, we're gonna engage that person. We're gonna have officers on scene to control traffic, to make sure that no one there is getting run over. That's going to be a little personnel heavy up front. More often than not, what happens is we ask the person to get out of the street and continue that conversation. Once we get to that point, we can clear a large portion of those officers on scene. So we'll almost always have a contact person, which is probably what you heard about in that class. The contact person who's talking to the person, directly engaged with the person, and you'll have a cover officer there. That person's job is to have kind of like what you were describing. They're going to have a step back a little bit. They're going to be watching kind of the whole thing, watching how the contact officer is doing, watching the body language and the nonverbal cues that are going on with the person that we're contacting. If that person is still very animated, even though they're off the street, probably have a third person there. But as things continue to cool down, we'll pare those officers on scene down to at least just the two. We probably won't go below the two people on scene. But yeah, so that cover person is kind of what you're describing, is that person who's got sort of that, taking that objective viewpoint. Now, if they're seeing something and they're seeing the officer that they're there with is getting animated and getting pulled into the discussion, maybe it's not being as productive as it could be, you might tap that person out and be like, hey, let's swap up, give me a try. That's that's very fundamental ground level stuff that we're learning day one at the police academy, and how to cover someone. Similarly, when we're doing like a negotiation, we're going to have the primary negotiator, the contact person. That person is going to have a coach every single time, and they're going to do kind of the same thing. They're evaluating, how's my negotiator doing? How is the conversation going? Are we improving? Or are we not? And they're going to continue to provide that assessment. But also, like Sergeant Smith was saying, every single officer on scene is required to be assessing, is this getting better? Is this not? Is there a better way to do this? Is there a better person to contact them?
Oh, regardless of whether or not they're on CIT or CNT, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We all have that obligation to be assessing, like, is there a better way to be doing this? Is what we're doing, is this the safest way to be doing this? That is a fundamental portion of just police work in general.
They'll have the background. Thank you.
And our expectation, Bonnie, too, is especially in these use of force scenes, it's not uncommon, and it's our expectation to make sure this supervisor is responding to those things. And so when you think about somebody that's there that has the community and governmental interest at heart, it can be that frontline supervisor that's not involved in these that can come in and actually make some of these decisions for the troops that are there. So it is our expectation that in most force encounters, there is a supervisory response.
Okay, thank you very much. And if you could just really quickly answer yes or no, just no explanation. So is that somewhere in the code that I just forgot about? Or is that just practice and not necessarily in the, sorry, not the code, you know what I mean?
You mean the concept of constant assessment or the expectation of assessment by officers, is that codified in our policy somewhere? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, just curious.
I don't know that answer. I don't know, Julie, do you know if you got that? Okay.
Okay, I was just curious. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Commissioner Lemon?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick clarifying question on G. So the examples that you discussed all related to mental health crises, and I was just wondering, is disengagement really only considered for people in mental health crises, or are there other instances? Thank you.
Was that question to me, Scott? Or to
Brandon?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be happy to tackle to speak to that. Disengagement is really, we'll look at any scenario. I mean, there are times when a campus party might be starting to spill up. Maybe it's not a huge deal. Maybe it had a complaint on it, but it's not really a big deal. But if we show up and it's making it worse, we'll disengage from that, reassess it, and find a better way to tackle that problem for sure. So it's not just in terms of mental health. I think that's the most common example to give because it's a little bit more clear cut. But on any of these types of calls where there's a very, very low level of governmental interest, this isn't, not a violent felony, not significant property damage happening. Any of those calls we could potentially disengage from that if it's just not worth harming, harming other people, getting officers hurt, that type of thing. We would consider that.
Commissioner Shiver?
Yeah, so I would like to go back to one of the very first things Bonnie said in regards to the agenda item summary and incorporating ad hoc committee language directly into policy. I think what I heard from Sergeant Smith and Chief is that the spirit was attempted to be conveyed, and I don't think you did a bad job doing it. I do think that anything less than fully adopting that language is going to be seen by the committee and by the community as insufficient. I think that Bonnie's right that it's not maybe as concise as we might want it. But given the fact that it's already under the objectively reasonable canopy, I also believe that language should be adopted. And I'm happy to make a motion to that effect if we need to.
Well, my question is that when the ad hoc committee, when you say anything other than using with their verbiage, the whole community would be upset. I'm part of this community. I'm not upset. So I want to know where are we getting this data that the community would be upset if we're not using the exact language?
Yeah, so last time I was speaking at our last meeting and I attempted to make a motion to translate what was being said because I was not hearing that from either the guest we had brought in, nor was I hearing it from the liaison we sent. What exactly they wanted, incorporated word by word in the policy. And here it is. It is right there. And obviously not everybody in the community is going to be upset. Personally, I think it's okay as it is, but I'm also not one of the people who put their time and effort into the ad hoc committee. and then felt snubbed and will continue to feel snubbed if we ignore them. Now, they might lash out in ways that I don't agree with, but at the end of the day, this language isn't bad. It's protected under the objectively reasonable standard, and it clarifies something that they feel passionately about. Just because I don't feel passionately about that doesn't mean I can't respect the feelings on the subject.
One of the things that I, because ultimately this is going to be up to me. You guys are going to get to make a motion all you want.
Right.
And then ultimately I'll make the decision on this.
Yeah.
The thing that I always struggle with when we have people making specific language suggestions is how easy it is to speak in absolutes. For instance, all, the word all would suggest a countless and an infinite amount of attempts to carry out law enforcement by nonviolent means. The fact that we want to carry out our ability to change behavior by nonviolent means is absolutely core to our belief system.
It's when objectively reasonable. So
yeah, but that's not what it says here, right? I mean,
that's what it says at the beginning of the policy.
Yeah, but then you turn around and you contradict that by putting something in policy that says all. And the piece that we have to be careful of is this policy is going to be the cornerstone by which we hold officers accountable. And if there's any violation of these policy, then they could be investigated for misconduct. And so we want to be careful about that. So what they're trying to get to here, I totally understand and want to get them to. I struggle with the absolutes, words like all, shall, will, all of those things. If we can massage that a little bit, understanding this is a dynamic profession and that not everything fits nice and neatly all the times that we want it to, I think we can get them there. So that would be my only challenge with just taking language proposed as is and plopping it into our policy. And the objectively reasonable standard is a use of force standard, specifically with Graham v. Connor and Graham factors. The fact that we're carrying out our law enforcement by nonviolent means doesn't necessarily speak to use of force.
So if we just take the beginning of D that I was referencing earlier, when time and circumstances reasonably permit, and then then add in the language officers shall, it weakens that shall. So it's gives us more latitude to interpret it at the Civilian Review Board. Would that be enough for you?
So again, the minute you say shall, I'd have to ask, what are you mandating we do in every instance by the word shall? You'd have to put it in a sentence for me so I can conceptualize.
Officers shall carry out law enforcement by nonviolent means.
I can't carry out law enforcement with only nonviolent means. We just got done talking about a school shooting situation where I'm going to go in and neutralize a threat that's killing children. Then I violate that policy right there.
Fair. I saw some comments in chat, which is unfortunately dicey when it comes to public records. I was wondering if I could.
I have a suggestion also, and I'm sorry I failed to say that the first time I talked about this. Basically, and I'm so sorry, but just real quickly, let me just slip in there because they're trying to get the sentence in there. So what if it was taking what if you mesh the two, the current thing that was provided, which is when it is objectively reasonable to do so, say when it is objectively reasonable to do so, all attempts shall be made to carry out law enforcement by nonviolent means. So you're using that legal language of when reasonably objectionable, and then just changing the words after that to match what the ad hoc committee was saying, but it means the same exact thing as what you're saying over there. Make every reasonable effort to de-escalate confrontations, other than you're adding that little bit where it just says nonviolent means. So you're attempting it if it's reasonable. And if there's an active shooter, then obviously it would be objectionably reasonable not to use it would be reasonable to use violent means to stop that. I think that would cover that.
Yeah, it's always challenging in the same sentence when you put objectively reasonable and shall.
Oh, without the shall, no shall in what I'm
You
saying.
know, when I read this, when I hear you're objectively reasonable, I think if you wanna go down that path, it feels like, you know, when objectively reasonable, the Eugene Police Department, this is a statement, not a policy statement, but when objectively reasonable, the Eugene Police Department will endeavor to carry out law enforcement by nonviolent means. I mean, that is our sincerest hope, is that we can carry out law enforcement by nonviolent means. And quite honestly, 98% of all law enforcement we do is done without any kind of violence. And so we, you know, if you think about the hundreds of thousands of calls for service and the hundreds of thousands of contacts that we have and enforcement contacts that we have, law enforcement contacts we have, there's a fraction of those that result in violence. And so I think that's in alignment with our values. We try to carry out law enforcement by nonviolent means. So
Yeah.
I think the good news is I think from a value perspective, we're there. We just have to figure out how to memorialize that in the policy.
Yeah, and I think I'm so sorry, B. I think that it's if you add that there, you're not taking away from the policy, but also I think you're using the language of this group of people, and
let Julie and I work on it.
Sorry, what was that?
Let Julie and I work on it.
And the chief.
Okay, thank you.
Work on that.
All right, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now, let me have Commissioner Wynn. Commissioner Wynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around G, you know, the disengagement thing. It seems like there's still some meat that needs to be added. And here's why. And, you know, the analogy earlier that was given about a suicide call, right? And the police showed up. They decided that by engaging the person who's been called on for suicide with a gun or whatever, and then the officer decided that it was, you know, it would be adding, you know, fuel to the fire by staying and by engaging, and the officer disengaged. What's next? It seems like there's something missing. You know, somebody's going to be called, somebody's going to be notified. There's something that needs to be added to that G line. It just seems kind of a little undone.
That's so intuitive. I mean, I'm totally with you on that. It's like we walk away and now what next? You know, do we just walk away and just leave it hanging? I mean, you could technically walk away from somebody that's in mental health crisis, which it might be the right call, but you still have somebody in mental health crisis, and which could escalate to a point where we get called back because now it is a dangerous situation. I agree with you. Maybe there's a way we can think about a couple of sentences to give some expectations for officers around walking away and initiating some level of resource or the appropriate resource. Maybe we just make a statement where we're not the right response in that moment in time, but if we know what the correct response is, that we will initiate or at least jumpstart that response for that, because we're talking about matching the right response with the need. If we're not the right response for that need, we might know what the right response is. And so a couple of sentences to say, hey, and the expectation is that you get the right response headed that direction.
I think if we can take what you just said and form it into, you know, something more concise that we can just add in there, I think that would satisfy me.
Yeah, gotcha.
Commissioner Dominguez?
Okay, so when I was talking to you, I had a minor brain fart as to what I wanted to say. So I've been learning that in my regular communication, I very often don't say what I think is the obvious. Like, obviously, I'm not going to use violence to solve something if it doesn't need to be that way. And I think in this case, maybe it just needs to be stated there's a benefit to just stating the obvious. That's all. Thank you.
I need to say something. by no means I want anyone to believe that I am anti-ad hoc committee, but I am pro the police commission recommendations and so forth. So when someone tells me that any committee on anything that we're going over has a list of something and we need to grab that list and all of a sudden adopt it because they represent the community, I have issue with that. So I don't want anyone to, if everyone in this body felt that that list that you brought up is what we need to be doing, and we talked about it, we discussed it, and that was the consensus, I'm all for it, 100%. And thank you for the time. But by saying that their time, well, they put all this time and energy, what do you think that we're doing? We're putting in time and energy. And the last time I remember, you're not being paid, nor are you getting lunch for it. So your time and efforts are as valuable as anyone else's time and efforts. And we have been putting in work too. So having said that, this is not done. From what I'm hearing, there's still many revisions to this policy based off of what I'm hearing from the commissioners, and we'll get to it. But when it's final, it will be our recommendations on this list, not the recommendations of any ad hoc committee. That's just my way of thinking. Did you have something else, Commissioner Dominguez? Anyone else?
I wonder if that's what Councilor Ye or Councilor Zelinka thought when they put together the ad hoc committee.
Well, we could ask them.
Sure. So I'll jump in. I think that I don't know that anyone's suggesting that you verbatim take everything that the ad hoc committee said and just adopt it. But I think the expectation is that you take their recommendations seriously, and that their work is respected. It's not the same as just someone coming to our public comment and making a comment. This is at a different, in my opinion, so I should just speak for myself probably, it's at a different level than just a person who comes and tells us their opinion or writes us an email, because these folks spent time, they were asked to do a specific job. They spent time educating themselves, deliberating, and bringing forth an opinion. So I guess if I had to characterize it, that's how I would characterize it. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but.
Councilor Zelinka, did you want to add to this?
Yeah, I appreciate what the ad hoc committee did. I think they were under a time crunch. I also thought we put it together too fast and didn't think it through enough. But in the end, we got a mixed bag of recommendations that were some well thought out, some relevant to things that were going on in the country and not necessarily in Eugene. The other ones that were were incredibly difficult to implement without much discussion. You know, in particular, the stuff on the CRB and turning it into investigator, judge and jury and executioner, with about an hour's worth of conversation. Was kind of on one end, and then the other end of things, they had a lot of good ideas in there, and numerous of them we've already implemented. So all in all, I think it on balance it was good, but it's a mixed bag.
Right. Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Mogart.
Yeah, I want to speak to the things that are not happening in our community, and I think. One thing I think first off is we were talking about the school shooting this evening, and for the most part, modern life, the modern idea of what we have as considered school shootings started in Thurston, even before Columbine. So, you know, just because it hasn't happened in such a length, you know, whatever length of time it was since Thurston, doesn't mean that it doesn't happen here. So that's one piece. But the other piece of it is my expectation and the consideration for I think most of us was making Eugene a leader across the nation for the work that should be implemented. We had cahoots and we had a lot of discussion about cahoots. That was part of our homework, is that we were supposed to look at some of the different ways that policies could be looked at. And cahoots was here. We were getting national attention for that program. So we were always trying to be at the forefront of things and not be responsive, but be more, progressive and sort of have an idea of what we're going to look at before things actually happen. Because I don't want to have somebody who's responding to something. I want to be able to be at the forefront of these different things or scenarios that might be coming up or things that we're dealing with. So I would say that.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment, Chair Boggs?
Yes.
So I appreciate that comment, Silver. And the thing that I would say is that as early as just this last week, myself and the city manager and Julie Smith and Leah Pitcher got together to update our ad hoc recommendations on where we're at, what we feel like we've tried to mostly land with the spirit of what was happening. Some of those have been just flat out adopted as written, and then been able to articulate the ones more difficult to do around whether it takes a statewide legislative change or a local charter or ordinance change, and being able to do that. But to your point about being a leader in the country, this conversation that we're having right here with this group is not happening in other jurisdictions. I'll just tell you that right now. I'm the president of the Oregon Association Chiefs of Police for us. So as far as statewide in Oregon, the fact that we're sitting here having this conversation, the fact that we have a CRB, the fact that we have an auditor, the fact that we have cahoots already puts us light years ahead of most agencies that are grappling with what police reform really looks and feels like. And so while we're on this journey and we always want to be better and we want to stay in the lead, we don't want to be looking over our shoulder. I think it's important for you guys to give yourselves some credit for the work that you've been doing on this commission and the fact that you're showing up having these tough conversations, because this, the other things like this that are showing up are called like Citizen Advisory Committee, which is basically a bunch of people that the chief of police finds his buddies to sit around and tell chiefs that they're doing a great job. This is different in so many different ways. And it's not lipstick on a pig, it's actually making a difference. And so I would just take this time to just applaud the efforts that this city, long before I got here, so this isn't a me thing, this is long before I got here, the things that the city has done to be a leader in this area.
Commissioner Mogart, your hand's up.
I just didn't put it down, but
Oh, no. I was just checking.
yeah, no,
Oh,
I agree with what Chief Skinner said. And I think that's one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that we continue to do that, because I don't want to have any kind of situation where we have national attention for something bad that's happened. I want us to make sure that we don't have something like that happen.
I agree. Thank you. Councilor Yang.
Yeah, sorry, I want to pull us back to the policy. I've had this thing I've been thinking about the whole time we've been sitting here, and I just wanted to bring it up. So at the very beginning, we talk about active listening, and it says that the intention, I don't have it right in front of me, obviously, but it was like the intention is to get people to make better decisions. When you say that, is that directed towards the person that you're talking to, or is the intention that the better decisions are both the officer and the other person? Because I guess when I read it, it makes me feel like we're using these techniques to affect the other person rather than that we're using active listening to actively listen. It's more like I'm just using the techniques to have an effect on the other person, which maybe that is, and that's fine, but I'm just curious. I don't know if that makes sense, what I'm trying to say.
Brandon.
Yeah, I can speak to that. It's kind of both things at once. The natural byproduct of us engaging in active listening skills is that we're going to listen to them and we're going to find that better outcome. The intent behind them is to take someone out of that crisis mind state. When the times we're going to be using these types of skills is when someone is found themselves, quite frankly, in a state where their emotional brain has taken over the rational brain, or rather a better description would be that the rational brain isn't getting the energy that it needs, doesn't get the blood flow. So the prefrontal cortex portion of our brain is kind of disengaged. And we're not making rational thoughts. So by extending that contact, by using time to our benefit, and letting that person have that time to vent and to try and ask these open-ended questions and getting them to continue to talk to us, we're trying to get them to re-engage that portion, that rational thinking portion of the brain, and so that they can start making some better decisions, and for themselves, so that we don't have to take action, or physical action rather.
Right, and I think that's great. But I think when people say that they want officers to actively listen, it's not that they want them to be like part of that active listening, right? That it's affecting that. I don't know if I'm articulating this right, that it's not just how we affect the other person's behavior, but that active listening is having an effect on the officer as well, right? That they're like, you can use all the techniques you want. If you're not actually listening, right? If you're thinking about, okay, I need to paraphrase, and okay, now I need to mirror, then do you get what I'm trying to say?
I do. Okay, I totally.
Great. And so that is in wrapped into that, right?
Yeah. And so that's the benefit. I mean, the active listening skills, we're law enforcement, this isn't active listening skills aren't a law enforcement thing. These are the skill set that came out of the counseling and therapy community. I mean, clear back to like the 40s and 50s. That kind of came into play. New York Police Department was the first one in the 70s to kind of to take those types of suggestions and implement them in these crisis situations to try and lower the temperature of these calls. And then, the FBI asked about it and said, hey, they basically took the program that the NYPD had taken. This is how they tell the story. They took their program in, put an FBI sticker on top of it, said, hey, look what we created. And now they're the ones who kind of teach all of that to law enforcement, at least from the negotiation world. And then we kind of distill that out even further out to the patrol line stuff. So kind of both things are happening. Yes, we are using those skills, that specific skill set, to affect the other person, to get them to be able to be an active participant in some better decision making that's going to lead them to not get possibly arrested or have force used on them. But the natural, the philosophical byproduct of that process, of that skill set, is that we as officers are going to slow down. Also, we're going to benefit from slowing that scene down and in listening to them. While we can think of, yes, I need to paraphrase. Yes, I'm going to use some minimal encouragers to continue to let them vent for a little while, to use up some of that mental energy that they have. The byproduct is that it's going to de-escalate us as well. But I think for the sake of the policy, what's being outlined is the specific skill set that we train to and that we can implement in those situations.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And Counselor, I think that what I could do to take into consideration what you just said, and I totally understand, is just to add into that sense, when using active listening techniques intended to encourage rational decision making for everyone involved, that would incorporate both for the subject and the officer that's responding to the scene. Does that touch on what you were trying to get across there?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I just wanted to make sure was the expectation of why we were using the techniques.
Dr. Garcia?
Yeah, and I'm happy to save my comments for final comments if it looks like we're getting close to the time limit.
Yeah, we're getting close to the time, and I can begin with you with final comments.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to, following up on what a number of people have said, that to express my appreciation for the opportunity to be on this board, and in particular to be able to raise questions like those that I had last month about the use of force or the de-escalation policy, and to see such a rapid turnaround with those revisions from the department. I'm very grateful for that, and And Chief Skinner is absolutely correct that these conversations are not happening in most, I would say, jurisdictions across the country. It's sort of leaving Eugene has definitely given me a renewed appreciation for our department, and I think that in particular, my time on the civil review board, you know, we have reviewed a couple of cases where de-escalation came up, and we've discussed de-escalation even more times. It's just been the topic of discussion on that board, and I think one of the frustrations for me personally has been that there hasn't been a lot of the policy wasn't concrete enough for me to really understand how to apply it from that perspective. And so I think this is the revisions and the direction that it's heading are going to be a great improvement for that. And yeah, just reiterate again my gratitude for being included on this board or this commission and in these conversations.
Thank you. We're on closing comments. Or did you have a question before we go there, Commissioner Dominguez?
Well, it was kind of for the chief about how he had said earlier, don't engage from Naivasha, like you wouldn't get don't engage from Naivasha. And I was just kind of curious about if he could just elaborate on that, because it's just like, would other officers not engage? And then she would. And how is it?
What I was trying to do in the context of having a potential school resource officer in Uvalde that didn't engage, what I was trying to articulate is the one school resource officer we do have, which happens to be serving the Bethel School District, is not absent the courage that it would take to put herself in harm's way in a similar situation. That's all I was trying to say. We can count on Naivasha.
Okay, and that's just one officer, and I'm just wondering.
Just one, right? Because
yeah,
they have one in the school, but I can assure you, in the last 4 years, I've not seen an absence of courage by the men and women of the Eugene Police Department when it comes to running towards danger.
And I hope the new people will be just the same. Thank you.
Well, the baby cops, the baby cops that come on, we've got to train them, but we're trying to screen for that best we can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That was my comment.
Closing comments, and we might make it. We have about 5 minutes. Let's see how we can do. Councilor Ye.
I don't think I have anything else to add, but good night. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Scott Lemon.
Thank you, Chair. It was great to see you all today. I guess the one statement I might have would be that public participation is really important, and I definitely agree with Commissioner Dominguez and Commissioner Shivers that we should listen to especially ad hoc committees. And with the police commission being one of the conduits to make citizens understand the police more, I think it's really important for us to incorporate that feedback. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Zelenka.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Boggs. Just one other comment on the comments I made before about the ad hoc committee. You know, the information they gave to us is when you're sitting in the council seat, you get barraged with a bunch of different types of information. The committee's one, you guys are one, public is one, other kinds of comments are one, the emails and the testimony we get, those are all the kinds of information we take into consideration and then make our decision. So it's not usually just a very narrow perspective that we get a much broader perspective. And that's what's really good about Eugene. And just to reiterate something that the chief said, and sometimes we need to step back a little bit and realize how unique and how special and important this work that we're doing here is, because he's right, it's not done in other places. And sometimes it seems really tedious, and sometimes it seems really hard. Sometimes it seems kind of like, why are we doing this? But it is really important, and it makes our community a better place. It makes our police department a better police department. And so I guess I just end by saying that most of the country is trying to get where we start in a lot of this stuff. They're trying to get a CRB. They're trying to get a police commission. They're trying to get these policies that we already have in place. And so we need to take stock of where we are, but also know that we can make it better and make it work better and have it be a system that works for everybody. So thank you all for your work that you do on this committee. I sometimes you probably don't feel appreciated, but you really should feel appreciated. It's important, good work.
Thank you. Commissioner Moberg.
Yeah, I just want to say it's been a pleasure to serve with you, Dallas, and I'm really sorry that we're not going to be able to have our back and forths anymore.
We'll still have our back and forth anytime.
Well, but I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be helping set that policy. So, so the positions of being a person who was on the ad hoc committee and then hearing like just the comments that sort of kind of, you know, or not giving the ad hoc committee due credit, it's really frustrating to me when that happens. So we took a lot of time, and I am a person who has several different hats that I wear in the community. And I too have a number of people that ask me questions or, you know, concerned about policy, concerned about issues, things that are having taken place here or things that happen at other places. And they want to know how we're going to respond to it. And that's what I bring to the table. So when we have these discussions, it's not Silver has a thing that he wants to talk about. It's Silver has a community that he wants to represent. So that is what I bring to our conversations here. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Commissioner Wynn?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Commissioner Michael Haynes Garcia for his time here with us. I hope that, you know, we will continue the work and that you would look back on and see what we've done after you're not here anymore, and that you would be impressed by what we did. And Savario, Commissioner Savario Mogart, thank you so much for your time as vice chair. You know, all good things have to come to an end. And it's not, you know, it's not the end, actually, you know, when we think about it that way. You can always speak here when we have our meetings. You can always reach out to Chairman Bogg. But anyway, just wanted to thank you, and thank you, Michael, as well. That's all. Thank you so much, everyone.
Commissioner Davis?
I don't have any comments.
Commissioner Dominguez?
I also do not have any comments. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, I want to thank, it's already been said, but thank everybody who comes and works here with us. Many of you were chosen because you represent more than just yourselves. And that's true of us all. So thank you all. Thank you very much to Chief as well for putting up with some of my back and forth earlier. Always appreciate that you have thick skin. And I see upcoming on our agenda is a work retreat. In the past, every 2 years, or every year we have this for our report to City Council. I am very hopeful that we can include a bylaws review coming up in September, now that everybody on the commission has had a chance to see how the bylaws work and don't work, including the fact that there are 1-year terms when our work plan is 2 years. I would very much like to see 2-year terms for our chair and vice chair so that they have a chance to fulfill a work plan. Yeah, so I'm hoping we can get a bylaws review now that we've got some experience under our belts as well. And with that, I am done. Thank you so much. I tried to hit 8.
Thank you. And as far as on my comments, I want to congratulate Bonnie for being elected vice chair. I want to say thank you to Dr. Garcia, who gave us valuable insight on many things. And I look forward to our next gathering. Thank you. Our meeting's concluded.